Had long pointed towards hostility and racism in most directions, making the boundaries of their neighborhood sanctuary well defined and abrupt, specific even to certain sides of the street. In years past, Chinese children who strayed beyond the top end of Broadway Avenue were often met by flying rocks from the kids of North Beach. But those tensions had softened over the past 2 decades, ever since Pearl Harbor instantly shifted the racial scarlet letter on the West Coast from the Chinese to the Japanese. If a curious social observation was to be made there on Brenham Place, it was the fact that Lau Bun and his Chinatown neighbors could claim Portsmouth Square for themselves. Not only was the plaza a prime location in downtown San Francisco, but as its ever-oxidizing memorial plaque testified, the park was flush with U.S. history. Portsmouth was where California was first declared American, courtesy of Captain John Montgomery, who raised stars and stripes over the Mexican customs house that sat on the plaza in 1846. As the city's first civic center, it was also where Samuel Brannan, a local businessman with a newfound monopoly on mining equipment, first announced the California Gold Rush to everyone within earshot just 2 years later. The fact, then, that this park, practically the Plymouth Rock of the West, belonged to a minority of people that the nation scarcely begrudged citizenship was certainly no small irony, though that's not to say it wasn't fitting. Chinese immigrants were arriving in San Francisco in the earliest days of the gold rush, and had continued to weave integral contributions into the fabric of the city and the American West through the formative periods to come. These were contributions that, in the face of a century of exclusion and racism, often manifested in ways both silent and unsung. Finishing his smoke, Lau Bun walked the few steps across the narrow street to his apartment building and quietly descended the steps to assess the end of the evening's class. Postures became precise, expressions more businesslike, as Lau Bun's students adjusted to his presence before he reached the bottom of the staircase. With more than 25 years of teaching Choi Li Fut Kung Fu and lion dancing within Chinatown, it was as a teacher, and really as the neighborhood patriarch, of martial arts that Lau Bun was best known. And if his reputation in the community was notable, it was legendary among his students. They murmured stories of his abilities on their short walks home from class, of his enforcer days in the tong, or his flawless handling of the straight sword. Perhaps it was the tale of the rat that he killed with a dart, at a sizable distance, in the dark. Or, the most frequently told of them all, the incident in Los Angeles. Not that Lau Bun's school was swarming with students. The size of his classes tended to fluctuate from year to year, but always maintained about a core dozen dedicated students, even as others fell by the wayside as a result of either too many movies or Lau Bun's hardline insistence on foundational abilities. Younger students especially interested in his weapon proficiency, of the straight sword, throwing dart, chain whip, and butterfly knife, quickly learned that months of horse stance training came first. Lau Bun's studio, like much of Chinatown's spaces, was Spartan. He had a small burner for cooking beneath the stairs, and a tiny adjacent room that was just large enough to accommodate a dresser and a bed with little else, opposite a closet-like bathroom. His main room, the studio space for his classes, was not large either, barely 12 square feet, but he fit them in well enough. In all, the location cost him $45 monthly, with a couple of extra dollars thrown in for utilities. He didn't have a phone. Prospective students caught word of him on the streets and descended the steps to inquire. He charged them $15 a month, and many of them arrived with bags of change, lunch money saved over time, and more sorely needed for means of defense. Young arrivals to Chinatown quickly learned that hostility could come as much from within the neighborhood as without. Native-born Chinatown kids would discriminate heavily against the newcomers.